The seventh victim lay crumpled on the cold stone beneath a flickering lantern, the delicate mask shattered beside the body. Elias knelt, his gloved hand brushing lightly over the victim's face, trying to imprint every detail into his memory. The mask had been different this time, more elaborate, more personal, and it carried a message that hit him deep. The victim was someone Elias had seen before, someone whose name dredged up memories he had tried hard to bury. The killer's game was no longer just a deadly puzzle. It was a personal vendetta, a shadow reaching into Elias's fractured past. The cold dread in Elias's chest tightened as he stared at the broken mask. This was no random killing. It was a calculated move, a message meant to unnerve him and draw him closer to the edge. He rose slowly, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. As he exited the alley, the distant strains of a gondolier's song floated up, haunting and melancholic, a stark contrast to the violence he had just witnessed. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of the past with the present nightmare. He needed answers, but every step forward seemed to plunge him deeper into a labyrinth of deception. Back in the heart of the masquerade, Elias found Livia Conti waiting in a private salon of a grand palazzo. The room was bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, casting flickering shadows on the ornate frescoes. Livia's eyes shone with a mixture of concern and guarded calculation as Elias recounted the grim discovery. Their conversation was low and charged, the air thick with suspicion. "You need to be careful, Elias," Livia warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "This killer knows more than we thought, and so do you. But trust is a scarce commodity in Venice tonight." Elias met her gaze steadily, though inside the unease gnawed at him. Their alliance, forged in necessity, was strained by secrets and half-truths. Yet, in this moment, he had no choice but to rely on her insight into the city's elite and the hidden currents beneath the festivity. Meanwhile, Marco Bellini worked tirelessly in the cramped evidence room of the local precinct. The scent of old parchment mingled with the briny air from the nearby canals, a constant reminder of the city's dual nature, beauty and decay intertwined. He sifted through the growing pile of clues, frustration mounting with each dead end. But beneath the surface, a steely resolve took hold. Marco knew this was his chance for redemption, to make amends for past failures by helping Elias unravel the killer's pattern. At the same time, Sofia Marini moved through the masquerade's shadows, her keen eyes and ears gathering whispers and rumors like precious currency. At a dimly lit bar thick with the scent of spiced wine and smoke, she leaned close to Elias, her voice urgent but cautious. "There's talk of a connection, a name whispered in Venetian circles linked to the victim and the killer's masks. It's dangerous information, but you need to hear it." Elias listened intently, the kaleidoscope of swirling masks and music around them fading into the background. Each new piece of information tightened the noose around the elusive killer, but the cost was clear. The closer Elias moved to the truth, the more his own identity fractured under the relentless pressure. As the seventh night unfolded, the masquerade's glittering facade grew darker, shadows lengthening both in the city's twisting alleys and within Elias's mind. The killer's design was becoming terrifyingly clear. This was a game of psychological chess, and Elias was both the hunter and the hunted. With the clock ticking relentlessly toward midnight, every decision bore weight, and every mask concealed a deeper secret. The chapter closed with Elias staring out over the Grand Canal from a dimly lit balcony, the water reflecting the shimmering lights of the carnival below. His breath was shallow, his thoughts a turbulent storm. The seventh mask had fallen, but the killer's true face remained hidden. And as the night deepened, Elias realized that to catch the ghost in the crowd, he would have to confront not only the enemy, but the shadows lurking within himself. The city whispered its secrets in the language of masks and mirrors, and Elias knew the final act was drawing near. But who would be left standing when the last mask fell? The masquerade festival's vibrant colors and raucous laughter had faded into whispers carried by the damp breeze. Elias Varga moved with deliberate stealth through the narrow alleys, his dark cloak blending with the shadows. The slick cobblestones glistened with recent rain, reflecting the scattered lanterns that flickered like ghosts in the mist. Ahead, beyond a wrought iron gate veiled in ivy, a faint murmur of voices rose low, urgent, and conspiratorial. Elias paused, his breath shallow, eyes narrowing as he adjusted the leather strap of his mask, the cold metal pressing lightly against his skin. Tonight, the game was no longer just a hunt for a killer. It was a battle against an invisible enemy pulling strings from the city's hidden core. He slipped past the gate, careful to avoid the creaking hinges, and ducked behind a marble column framing the entrance to a secluded courtyard. There, beneath the flickering glow of wrought iron sconces, a circle of masked figures convened, their faces obscured by intricate Venetian masks, some gilded with gold filigree, others stark and menacing. Each carried an air of authority and menace. Elias's eyes darted between them, recording their every gesture, voice inflection, and the subtle shifts in their posture. This was the secret society whispered about in hushed corners, the shadowy puppeteers of the masquerade's chaos. Their influence was no longer speculation. It was the cold truth threatening to unravel the investigation. A figure with a raven-black mask spoke, his voice smooth but laced with steel. "The time draws near. Our interests must be protected at all costs." The agent grows bolder, but he treads on thin ice. A woman's voice, sharp and commanding, responded, "We cannot afford missteps. The masquerade is our shield and the city our stage. Let the agent chase shadows while we tighten our grip." Elias clenched his fists, the weight of the revelation crushing yet galvanizing him. If the killer was a ghost hiding behind shifting faces, this society was the dark current beneath the Venetian waters, pulling all into its depths. The next day, Elias found himself in the opulent drawing room of a palazzo, its walls draped with crimson velvet and adorned with centuries-old tapestries. Livia Conti sat across from him, her elegant form poised with practiced grace. Her dark hair fell in glossy waves, and her eyes, normally vibrant and unreadable, held a flicker of something unfamiliar, caution. "You're playing a dangerous game," Livia warned, her voice low but firm. "These people don't just wield power, they devour those who stand against them." Elias met her gaze steadily. "I don't have the luxury of stepping back." "Not this time." She sighed, a shadow crossing her face. "Just remember, loyalty in Venice is a currency more volatile than the tides. Trust can be bought and betrayed with the same coin." Their uneasy alliance deepened, tension threading through every exchanged word and guarded glance. Elias knew that Livia's loyalties were as complex as the city itself. She was both a guide and a potential hazard. Meanwhile, Marco Bellini worked tirelessly in the dim light of his cramped office, the scent of stale coffee mingling with the musty air. He spread out maps, documents, and photographs, his weathered fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. His rugged face, marked by years on the Venetian streets, was etched with determination. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a series of names connected by red lines. "Every official we suspect has ties to this society. They control the masquerade, the police, even the courts." Elias leaned in, the grim weight of corruption settling over them. "It's worse than I thought. We're not just hunting a killer, we're confronting an entire system." The question of how far to go gnawed at Elias as the days passed. Alone on a gondola, he floated silently beneath the moonlit sky, the water reflecting his distorted image. The city's lights danced on the surface, fragmented and elusive, much like the truth he sought. He wrestled with the lines blurred between justice and vengeance, legality and necessity. To expose the society, he might have to bend the very rules he swore to uphold. Could he cross those lines without losing himself? The chapter closed on Elias's face, a mask of resolve tempered by doubt, as the gondola glided into the darkness. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was shrouded in shadows darker than any mask. With every step deeper into Venice's underbelly, Elias faced the chilling reality that the masquerade was more than a festival. It was a battlefield where the distinction between friend and foe, right and wrong, had all but vanished. And in this city of masks, the greatest danger might come not from the killer he pursued, but from the man he might become. From his vantage point on a crumbling balcony overlooking the Grand Piazza, Elias Varga surveyed the masquerade below. The kaleidoscope of swirling masks and ornate costumes moved like a living tide beneath the flickering lanterns, each face as inscrutable as the last. The air was thick with the heavy scent of spiced wine and the faint undertone of something darker fear, perhaps, or the lingering trace of the killer's presence. Elias's gray eyes scanned the crowd, seeking the 8th incarnation of the 13th mask. The killer's ability to slip seamlessly from one identity to another had confounded him for nights, each new face a cipher he struggled to decode. Tonight, the stakes felt higher, as if the masquerade itself had grown more sinister, the laughter more hollow, the shadows deeper. The distant notes of a violin floated through the air, weaving a haunting melody that seemed to mock his futile search. His thoughts were interrupted by a subtle movement nearby. Turning, Elias spotted Sofia Marini emerging from the dim entrance of a nearby tavern. Her sharp gaze met his, and with a barely perceptible nod, she beckoned him inside. Inside the tavern, the atmosphere was thick with smoke and murmurs. Candlelight flickered against the worn wood, casting dancing shadows on the faces of patrons lost in their own secrets. Sophia leaned close, her voice a conspiratorial whisper amid the ambient clamor. "Rumors swirl faster than the gondolas, Elias," she said, eyes darting toward the door. "The 8th mask is more than a disguise, it's a message. Someone close is playing a deadly game." Elias felt a chill despite the warmth of the room, Sophia's fingers tightened around her glass. "I don't know yet, but trust is a luxury we can't afford. Be careful who you watch and who watches you." Her words echoed in his mind as he left the tavern, the masquerade's music swelling outside like a sinister heartbeat. He found Marco Bellini waiting near the canal's edge, his rugged features taut with concern. "Another mask," Marco said grimly. "And another body? They're tightening the noose." Elias nodded, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. "The killer's game is evolving. We have to be smarter." Their uneasy partnership was a fragile thread holding together the unraveling investigation. The killer's new face was not just a mask, it was a challenge. One that would force Elias to confront betrayals he had long feared. Later, in the twisting back alleys where the city's lights dimmed to near darkness, Elias encountered a figure whose mask shifted subtly with each movement, a blur of emotions too quick to read. The confrontation was a dance of shadows and half-truths, each word loaded with hidden meaning. "You think you know me," the masked figure hissed, voice laced with venom and mockery. "But the truth is a mask worn by us all." Elias's heart pounded. The lines between hunter and hunted blurred, and doubt gnawed at him. Was this the killer or another pawn in a deadly game? The night deepened, and Elias found himself in a secluded garden with Livia Conti. The scent of night jasmine hung heavy in the air as they spoke in hushed tones. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and defiance. "You're chasing ghosts, Elias," she said softly. "But some masks hide wounds deeper than you realize." Their conversation laid bare the fractures in their alliance, the unspoken fears and betrayals lurking beneath polished veneers. As the midnight hour approached, Elias stood alone amidst the revelry, the masquerade's dark heart beating all around him. The 8th mask was a warning and a promise in escalation that left no room for error. Trust was scarce and every shadow could be a threat. With every passing second, the killer's game tightened, and Elias knew the path ahead would demand sacrifices not just of others but of himself. The masquerade was no longer just a festival of masks. It was a crucible where identity, loyalty, and survival were tested to their breaking points. The night whispered its deadly secret. In Venice, beneath the veneer of celebration, the true mask was the one Elias wore himself. And as the clock ticked down, the question remained, who was the man behind the mask? And could he outwit a killer who changed faces like a ghost in the fog? The city held its breath, and so did Elias. The game was far from over.
Within the ornate walls of a centuries-old palazzo, Livia Conti lingered by the towering window, her gaze tracing the rippling reflections on the canal below. The mask she had worn earlier that evening now rested heavy in her hand, a weight symbolizing the dual lives she led. The laughter and music from the festivities drifted faintly, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within her. Every heartbeat echoed the conflict that churned beneath her composed exterior. Her family's legacy, steeped in power and tradition, demanded allegiance and silence. Yet, the path she had begun to walk alongside Elias Vargan, agent driven by relentless pursuit of truth, pulled her toward a dangerous defiance. She could feel the invisible chains of loyalty tighten, threatening to bind her to a fate she no longer wished to accept. A soft knock at the door shattered the fragile quiet. Elias entered, his presence commanding yet weighed by exhaustion. His piercing grey eyes, usually masked by calculated calm, now flickered with a raw intensity that pierced through the layers of pretense. "Livia," he began, voice low but urgent, "we're running out of time. The masquerade's shadows grow darker, and every moment you hesitate, the killer gains ground. I need to know where you stand." She met his gaze, searching for trust amid the tangled web of deceit. "You ask a heavy question," she replied, fingers tightening around the mask. "My family's expectations are not easily cast aside. But this masquerade, it's become a battleground far beyond their ambitions." Outside, the distant chime of a bell marked the hour, a reminder of the relentless ticking clock that governed their lives. Elias stepped closer, the chill in the air matching the tension between them. "Help me unmask the killer, Livia. Your knowledge could turn the tide. But if you waver, if you betray me—" "I know the stakes," she interrupted, voice steady despite the turmoil. "But betrayal has many faces here." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marco Bellini, the local detective whose gruff pragmatism had become an uneasy pillar in Elias's investigation. Marco's weathered features softened as he addressed Livia. "You're caught between worlds, but the city needs allies who choose wisely. We can't afford divided loyalties now." Livia regarded Marco carefully, the flickering candlelight casting shifting patterns that seemed to mirror the ambiguity of trust between them. "I'll aid you," she declared, the decision crystallizing in her tone. "But know this, I act not just for justice, but to protect what remains of my family." The alliance forged in that moment was tenuous yet vital, a fragile thread amid the masquerade's intricate tapestry of deceit. As they spoke, the sounds of Venice's restless night ebbed and flowed, a symphony of secrets whispered on the wind. Later, Livia found herself alone on a narrow bridge arching over the mist-covered canal. The mask she now wore concealed half her face, a metaphor for the choice she had embraced and the uncertain road that lay ahead. The water below mirrored the fragmented light of lanterns, distorting reflections much like the shifting identities that haunted the festival. In the distance, the festival continued unabated, a swirling dance of masks and shadows where trust was scarce and danger ever present. Livia's breath caught as she pondered the consequences of her choice, an irrevocable step that might save or doom them all. Meanwhile, Elias, armed with Livia's intelligence, prepared to navigate the treacherous maze of alliances and betrayals that defined the masquerade's dark heart. Each revelation brought them closer to the elusive killer, yet the closer they came, the more fragile their trust became. The chapter closed on a note of tense anticipation, the city's labyrinthine canals reflecting the fractured identities and fractured loyalties that would determine the fate of all entwined in the deadly game. The night was far from over, and with Livia's choice made, the stakes had never been higher. Elias's next moves would have to be precise, for in Venice, beneath the shifting masks, no secret remained hidden forever. And as the clock edged closer to midnight, the question lingered. Who would pay the price of betrayal when the masks finally fell?
Elias Varga sat hunched in a small, shadowed corner of a canal-side cafe, the flickering candlelight casting sharp angles across his gaunt face. Around him, the sounds of the masquerade, masked laughter, a violin's melancholy wail, footsteps on cobblestones, mingled with the distant splash of oars, a symphony of secrets and shifting identities. But Elias was not here to revel. He was here to unmask a killer who wore a new face each night. His fingers trembled slightly as they flipped through the dog-eared pages of his notes, where sketches of masks and names, dates and places, interwove with cryptic observations and tentative conclusions. The killer's pattern was becoming clearer now, a puzzle slowly assembling despite the chaos of the masquerade's ceaseless shifting. Each mask was not random, it was a calculated signpost, a message encrypted in deception. The victims were not merely targets. They were pieces in a game that stretched back into Elias's own fractured past. A sharp knock on the cafe's weathered door broke his focus. Livia Conti slipped inside, her dark eyes scanning the room before settling on him. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator cloaked in silk and mystery, her elaborate mask catching the candlelight in glinting facets. "You should not linger here so openly," she whispered, sliding into the seat opposite him. "The city watches, Elias, and so does the killer." Elias pressed his lips tightly, a brief flicker of vulnerability flashing in his gray eyes. "I have little choice." The pattern points to the final mask. "I think I know who it will be, but the clock is against us." Livia's gaze sharpened. "And you? Are you against yourself?" "You look worn," he swallowed hard. The relentless pressure of the last nights had begun to erode his resolve. The faces around him blurred and twisted in his mind, allies indistinguishable from foes, truth from betrayal. The killer's ability to manipulate identity was not just a threat outside, it was tearing at Elias's own sense of self. Their whispered exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Marco Bellini, the gruff, pragmatic detective whose skepticism was as palpable as the Venetian humidity. Marco's presence was a grounding force, a reminder that beneath the masquerade's illusions lay real danger and real stakes. "Enough shadows," Marco said, slamming a thick dossier onto the table. "Look at this. We have names, connections, evidence that ties these masks to people in the city's elite and to your past." Elias leaned over the dossier, the harsh fluorescent light of the precinct replacing the cafe's warm candle glow. The files detailed meetings, financial transactions, and whispered rumors, stitching together a tapestry of conspiracy and vendetta. Yet even as the evidence mounted, Elias's mind wavered. Paranoia gnawed at him, whispering that even Marco and Livia might wear masks beneath their masks. "We don't have time for doubts," Marco said, catching the hesitation in Elias's gaze. "You're not alone in this. Trust the facts, not the fears." But trust was a currency Elias had spent too freely in the past, only to be left bankrupt and exposed. As twilight deepened into night, Elias found himself on a narrow balcony overlooking the Grand Canal, the city's heartbeat pulsing beneath the glittering masks and swirling gowns of the festival. The bells of the nearby campanile tolled the hour, their echoes folding into the mist like a countdown to doom. The ticking clock motif was no longer metaphorical. It was a hammer driving at his temples, a reminder that each passing minute brought the killer closer to the final, deadly act. The carnival's joyous facade masked a darker truth, and Elias was caught in its deadly dance. The pattern was clear, the stakes higher than ever, but the lines between hunter and hunted, friend and foe, were dissolving into shadows. Could he hold on to his fractured identity long enough to unmask the 13th mask? Or would the relentless pressure of time and betrayal break him first? The night deepened, the masquerade's music rising to a fevered pitch. Elias's breath fogged in the chill air as he prepared for the battles yet to come, the final masks yet to fall, and the last truths yet to be revealed. The candlelight flickered, throwing wavering shadows onto the maps and photographs, the dim glow reflecting the tenuous hold they had on the truth. Around him, Livia Conti's sharp eyes scanned the details, fingers tracing the inked lines of anonymous notes, while Marco Bellini leaned forward, brows furrowed beneath his weathered face. "We're close," Elias murmured, voice low but steady, his gaze locked onto the intersection of clues that had eluded them for so long. "The secret society's grip is weakening. These patterns, they're no mistake. Someone wants us to find them." Livia's lips curved into a faint, guarded smile. Or they want us to think that disinformation is their game. We can't afford to be complacent. Marco nodded, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. The streets whisper differently now. The usual shadows are moving, and not all of them are friendly. Elias felt the weight of the ticking clock pressing heavier with each passing moment. The masquerade's shifting faces and hidden agendas had conspired to keep the killer one step ahead for too long. Yet tonight, the disparate clues-coded messages intercepted by Alessandra Fiore, cryptic symbols found at crime scenes, and the subtle shifts in the political undercurrents of Venetian high society began to weave into a coherent picture. A secure line crackled to life, Alessandra's voice sharp and urgent. Elias, the latest decrypted transmissions confirm fractures within the society's inner circle. Some members are turning against each other. This is the leverage we need. The rune's tension shifted, a spark of hope igniting amid the shadows. Good, Elias replied, fingers tightening into a fist. We use their discord. We expose the fractures before they can regroup. Livia's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. But exposing them means we also expose ourselves? The stakes are higher than ever. The masquerade around them, with its glittering masks and whispered lies, was more than a backdrop, is the battleground. As Elias prepared to move forward, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the night air was thick with fog, muffling the sounds of the canals and cloaking the streets in mystery. Later, standing on a fog-shrouded bridge, Marco surveyed the dark waters. His mind replayed the uneasy alliances they had forged, the betrayals narrowly avoided, and the relentless pressure to keep the killer from striking again. The chill wind tugged at his coat, a reminder of the fragility of their position. Back inside the palazzo, Elias paced, thoughts racing. The countdown to the final confrontation was accelerating. Each revelation brought them closer to the killer and closer to danger. The secret society's retaliation was inevitable, but so was Elias's resolve. We've unraveled their threads, he said to Livia and Marco as they gathered once more. Now we prepare to cut them, for good. As the clock edged toward midnight, the masquerade's glittering facade masked a city on the brink of upheaval, and Elias stood at the eye of the storm, ready to face the final test. The threads of deception, betrayal, and shifting identity were pulling taut, and only the strongest would survive the unraveling.